Welcome everybody to Real Time, for real everyday movie fan. I'm your Don, Josh Williams, and we are gathered here in friendship to give you our real-time review of none other than the anniversary of The Godfather. Praise it be. I'm joined here as well by my good friends.
Ryan Murphy. I'm German Irish.
You come to me on this day, the anniversary of my movie, with this request to review it. You insult me. Where's the honor? Where's the respect? I'm James Sheridan.
I haven't insulted you yet. That might be coming. We'll see.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As you heard, we are giving you our review of the 50th year anniversary of what me and Ryan consider to be the greatest movie of all time.
Two out of three of us consider the greatest movie of all time. The Americans consider.
Yep. But we got our fellow Canadian here, which I feel like it's going to be a little different for him. But we shall see. We shall see.
It's okay. By the way, Josh, I'm not gonna lie. That was not a bad impression. You know, I've underestimated you. Yeah.
It's okay, man.
We can hear Tina. We can hear the wife. Where the wife, she's not supposed to be in the picture. She's not supposed to be here. The women folk, you know, they do their own thing. They stay in the kitchen. They cook for the men, you know.
Now, everybody, before we get into our review, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell so you receive all of our great content we have for you. Ryan just did what I'm considered, and he thought as well, one of his greatest interviews, probably most acclaimed interviews with
certainly the highest profile interview I've done yet. So
definitely check it out there. We'll actually put a link somewhere here to go check it out. It's a great interview. I watched it myself. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Hey, you do great things of interviewing the people who I believe really should be interviewed, because a lot of people in the industry that we do this in, they do like the actors and the directors and the writers and maybe the cinematographers. But for me, like production design, sound mixers, they are just as important as anybody else.
I meant saying we're gonna link it. Put me on the spot because I gotta edit this and I don't know how to do that. So
you'll do fine, my son. Okay, you'll do fine.
All right. So what are we gonna do? How are we gonna do this? Because
I figured. It's been out for 50 years. If you have not seen this, I don't even think I should put a spoiler alert because we're mainly here to celebrate it. At least Ryan and I. I don't know much about James because James is like, oh boy, I need liquid courage to talk about this movie. But Ryan, just to start us off,
so used to arguing with me, he might be surprised about how nice I can be about this. Like, okay, if you don't like it, it's, you know.
When we reviewed Ghostbusters Afterlife, you said you were afraid of my reaction to your negative review. I'm showing you the same amount of respect. I know this is like your favorite, the end all be all movie, so
same here.
I have thoughts. I'm going to share them. So
T2 was pretty close, but you know we missed the 30th anniversary of that. Y'all left me in the lurch. So
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Ryan, but you should know this. Who has directed this movie and who all starred in it?
Usually, I
just so people may not know
this and have to pull it up. But in this case, this movie was directed by Francis Ford Coppola. By the way, this is Francis Coppola wine I'm drinking right here.
Very nice.
So salute to you, the hater of all superhero movies. He and us would all three of us would get into it with him. To be fair, James and I would join forces and go after Francis Ford Coppola, who recently made the comment. He said, "Oh, I did love Deadpool." At any rate. I
mean, a man's allowed to be wrong. He can be wrong all he wants. So
it's true.
No skin off my back.
The Godfather was, of course, directed by Francis Ford Coppola from a screenplay he co-wrote with the author of the book, Mario Puzo. And it stars Al Pacino, a very young nobody named Al Pacino, Marlon Brando, James Caan, Robert Duvall, Talia Shire, John Casale, and many others.
Diane Keaton, Abe Vigoda.
Yeah. Diane Keaton, Abe Vigoda, you name it. You know, they're in this movie. So, good cast.
Star-studded cast.
Not necessarily at the time. They had Marlon Brando and James Caan, but...
honestly,
Brando, this was actually Brando's comeback, too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they didn't want Brando in the movie. He was box office poison at that point, but he was still, you know, people knew who he was. And James Caan was the one they wanted in the movie. They were like, oh, we got to get at least James Caan in the movie. Everyone else was nobody. So
now, typically we will we always start off with Ryan, and we're going to do the same fashion, which typically a lot of times Ryan hates movies, but as I said before, this is me and Ryan's. We consider it to be one of the greatest
certainly
movies.
You and I have this weird thing where I'm like, you're like, well, there's my favorite, and then there's what's the best. And so my favorite is the Goonies, but the best is the Godfather. I don't put up with that shit. For me, it's like what I consider the best is my favorite, etc. Not to say that any great movie, like I understand where you're coming from a certain point. Like there's movies that I realize are great that aren't necessarily my favorites, like Shawshank Redemption, great movie, nowhere in my favorites. I get it to a certain extent, but like at the end of the day, my favorite I think is also the best. Is the Godfather. And Terminator 2 comes close, but
they don't make them like that.
So I guess they don't make them like they used to. So yes, this is my favorite movie, and I've been thinking about it throughout the day. What am I going to say about this? And I don't have much to say about it. Someone asked me, why is it your favorite? Tell me about it. Tell me why. I don't know. I just love every moment of it. I just love the way it's shot. I love the way that the music works in the film. I love the story. This is a grand Shakespearean story. To quote Francis Ford Coppola, it's the story of a king with 3 sons, right? The first son was the oldest and heir apparent, but was too rash and hot-tempered for the throne. The middle son was loyal and caring, but too stupid. But the youngest son was just right, but wanted nothing to do with the throne. It's a Shakespearean tragedy. It's a tragedy of a man's fall from grace, but it's enveloped in this story that we all sort of love to take part in. Like, it's not like a typical tragedy where you feel bad at the end, even though you realize something bad has happened in the end. Michael has fallen from grace. He's lost his soul, so to speak. Gosh, it's fun along the way, and you romanticize it the whole way. You romanticize the family. You want to be a part of the Corleone family. You want to go evil too. You want to join this family and like be a part of this world because this world is so apparent. And that's largely due to the direction of Francis Ford Coppola. I read one time, I think that 30% of this film, 30% of screen time has food and drink in it. 30% of the time people are either eating Chinese takeout or Clemenza is, talking about how he makes his pasta because he's got to cook for all these guys, or they're even just in the office and they got to move a plate full of food because people have been eating there because people got to eat. And it's just all about like the camaraderie and the family. So even though it is, people always say this is a movie about family, it's a beautiful movie about family. I always have to remind them it is a tragedy. It's a story about a man falling from grace and going to the dark side. Revenge of the Sith was literally inspired by this film. Like there's parts of Revenge of the Sith that copy this film, but it is also at the same time this great story about family, because the reason Michael falls from grace is to defend his family. And to that's what makes him just like Anakin. I mean, it's literally the same story to a certain extent. It's, someone who is trying to protect the ones they love, and through those actions ends up falling to the dark side. And then that has more ramifications in part 2, where by the path he started by trying to defend his family ends with him destroying his family, sure, but we're not here to review part 2. We're just here to review part 1. So it's a great movie. So that's a great story that I just summed up for you. I hope we talked about certain movies I like. I'm always very hard. I'm like, but what's the story? What's the story that I can sum up in a few sentences that sounds poetic and sounds good and sounds worth my time? Hopefully that story I just said sounds that way. But then the execution along the way is also just to die for. Every frame has art in it. Every frame is great. And I'll tell you, the moment I'm watching this movie, every time, the moment it hits me where I'm watching something great and I just feel overwhelmed, I feel emotional, is the moment when Michael's in Sicily and he's walking with Apollonia and their family is walking behind them, and they're just walking, and you hear the music swell, and it's just this idyllic music for this idyllic time, this innocence when they're in the untouched land of Sicily, where it's just da, 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 da. And that's the moment where I just randomly feel like, oh God, I freaking love this movie. The end. That's my spiel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can really put a score on these kind of movies because it's so much older. But
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Yep. So we'll kind of go round robin. I have a feeling James is not too on par with me and Ryan, but James, why don't you go ahead and talk about your thoughts on it? Because you did watch it last night. Just kind of, I saw it like 2 months ago, so still always fresh in my mind. I watch it at least once a year. But James, go ahead. Like, what do you think after rewatching it? What are your thoughts on it?
funny thing is, I originally watched this film when I was in high school, and I was, a film student wannabe, trying to learn how film works and trying to watch as many classics and epics as possible. And a buddy of mine who was also a film guy just kept pushing Godfather. He just kept saying, it's the greatest film of all time. You've got to see it. It's the greatest film of all time. And I watched it, and it was good, but I didn't have strong. It didn't hit for me the way it does for a lot of people. And then I didn't watch it for a long time. And usually when that happens with me, when I revisit a film, either I'll come to appreciate it more, or it kind of solidifies what I originally thought. And unfortunately, this one kind of solidified what I originally thought. I don't have any real criticism for this film. It's not a bad film. It's an excellent made film. It's a 10 out of 10 film. It is a perfect film. I just don't like it. And as Josh was saying, as Ryan was saying about Josh in his preamble, to me, there's a difference between the best film and the film I enjoy the most.
Yeah.
And there are films that cross over on both of those lists. Ryan brought up Shawshank Redemption. I could watch that movie all freaking day. I love that movie to death. I don't know I'd put it on my top 10 of all time, but I'm not offended when I see it on top 10 film lists and whatnot. This one,
not to interrupt you, but Shawshank Redemption is number 1 on IMDb. Godfather, I believe, is number 2 still.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I don't put much stock in IMDb for a lot of reasons, but it just, I don't know. Obviously, it's no secret. There is a film I love more. I'm not going to say that this film is the greatest film of all time. It is the greatest film. Actually, for me, it's not even the greatest film, because there are other films I love more in terms of their production and value and all that stuff. Like, I would put, Back to the Future and Star Wars and Jaws and Shawshank Redemption and most of the work of Alfred Hitchcock and John Ford and Akira Kurosawa on, lists. But in terms of Godfather, I give it its full credit. Again, I'm giving it a full 10 out of 10 for it being an outstanding film. The performances are great. The direction is wonderful. The photography is great. The storytelling is masterful. I'm just fucking bored watching it. I'm not joking. I was so bored watching this movie. It takes so long to get to any point. I'm not invested in any of the characters, which for me is kind of a breaking point for a movie. A movie might be wonderful, but if I can't like somebody in this film and have somebody to empathize with, then I don't care. And I was, for the most part, with Michael up until the point where he shot 2 dudes in the face.
One of the best scenes.
Oh, it's a great scene.
Ever.
Don't get me wrong. Some of the violence in this film, while it is so realistic, there's a point where someone gets shot in the face, and if you've ever seen anyone actually get shot in the face, the depiction of the pouring of the blood out of the face was so goddamn realistic. It gave me flashbacks to horrible things I've seen. So,
learning more about James here.
I've seen some fucked up shit. Do not look up Bud Dwyer. Please do not look up Bud Dwyer. Now everyone's going to go do that, but
good job. Yeah, everybody's going to look it up now.
Now our viewer will watch Bud Dwyer.
No, not Bud Dwyer. Bud Dwyer.
Whatever.
Anyways,
our viewer will watch Bud Dwyer.
Back to
Hi, viewer.
Back to Godfather. Again, I have no fault in this film outside of maybe pacing, and that is a purely subjective thing. I have very low attention span because of ADHD, so I have a difficult time getting through a lot of older movies. Not all of them. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Hitchcock. Kurosawa films work great. A lot of John Ford stuff.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings is, I consider that more modern, but something like It's a Wonderful Life to me is one of my all-time favorite films.
Casablanca
is great. Wizard of Oz.
I thought we were just talking about long movies. That's why. Now you guys are all.
No, I'm talking about pacing in terms of certain periods have slower pacing. The further back you go in film, the more longer paced things tend to be. And once we hit the 80s, things has got to that MTV sort of hyperkinetic thing, and now we're into much more. Okay. You watch a Michael Bay film and it's a cut every 10 seconds, and it's I
Some
just
like
got
one
over
foot of
watching
radius,
it.
kind of what you're thinking about.
It's not in part
Yeah.
1, but there is a scene every time I watch part 2. I just can't believe it. You just watched part 2 this morning. There's a shot in part 2 where they're at the St. Semplin Festival, the Italian festival, and someone's carrying a crucifix, or they're with all the money, and there's a shot of this crucifix marching through the crowd that just lasts like 20 seconds. And it's like the longest damn 20 seconds of my film going life. Every time I watch it, I can't believe they kept on it that long. But that's part 2, whatever.
I didn't even get there. I got so bored of part 2 that I stopped watching it like 20 minutes into it.
You stopped watching part 2?
No,
bitch.
I can say that maybe about part 3, but not part 2.
Yeah, no, I know.
Man, one of the best sequels ever.
Oh my gosh. We did our top 10 sequels like 4 years ago that I totally forgot about. One of my friends actually just rated our channel and watched all my videos. I forgot to tell you this, Josh, but yeah, someone did that. And they said the one they were watching was the top 10 sequels. And we did Godfather Part 2 as our number 1. So
nope. I think T2 was our number 2.
I think so. Yeah.
Yep. But anyway, I mean, I get what you're saying, James.
Let's let James finish his thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like you talk about this being the greatest film of all time, and I don't begrudge it that title of greatest film of all time. I don't agree it's the greatest film of all time. Call me old-fashioned, but I'm still in the camp that Citizen Kane was a better film by itself, but
definitely ahead of its time.
Neither of them are ones that like I'm going to put into my queue to watch once a year kind of thing. Like great films I've got in my collection. Like I just bought the Godfather series because I've never had like a good set of them. But like I've got like Schindler's List and I've got, Grave of the Fireflies, and these are all great movies, but I don't feel inclined to watch them frequently. And unfortunately, Godfather is one of those ones where like I will watch these on occasion to remind myself of like its importance and like the style and the incredible filmmaking that went into it. It's just one that like, I don't know, sometimes I'd rather just watch Back to the Future. And that makes me
okay,
that much more happy.
People would argue Back to the Future is one of the best movies ever made.
I would argue it is definitely in my top 5.
And I completely understand what you're saying. You're not alone because a lot of people will agree that they will acknowledge the importance and the greatness of something like The Godfather or Citizen Kane, but they'll never go back and watch it. Same with Schindler's List. I just had this conversation with somebody where I was volunteering at a little earlier. They understand how amazing Schindler's List is, but not just going to pop it in on a Saturday night just to watch it.
That's what I say all the time. This is, you're echoing like, who the hell just like, what do you want to watch tonight, man? Let's get some pizza and let's watch Schindler's List. No, no one fucking does that.
But I mean, I'm glad you acknowledge just how masterful this film is created. Because we're all in the filmmaking business in one way, shape, or another, and I think from what we've learned about it in the business, you can acknowledge just how masterfully the camera work is, how beautiful the rule of thirds is used, and its composition. There's not much to Godfather as far as lighting goes. I mean, there's a lot of natural light to it, which can be.
It's period. It's intended to be sort of period. It's not intended to be like a film motion picture kind of lighting where it's like bombastic in your face. It's meant to be a gritty capture of a time period where like America's changing and there's terrible people doing terrible things. And this just happens to be one family who's doing terrible things, but had some sort of like moral compass kind of thing. And it's meant to like be a time capsule. One of the things that really kind of like blew my mind was how much actual period stock footage was in there. Cause I kind of expected them to like close down a street and like shoot like old cars coming up and down the street. But no, there was like a lot of just shots of like I've worked with a lot of stock footage. I can tell when it's something is stock footage now. Yeah. And there was a lot of it in there. I was surprised by how much.
And we always interrupt each other, but I don't mean to interrupt you further, Josh. But I did want to say I'm amazed that the films, neither of the original 2 films that are so acclaimed, for Gordon Willis, the cinematographer on all 3 movies, never got an Oscar nomination for the 2 films. Among the 21 Oscar nominations that the 2 films garnered, they never got a single, neither one got a nomination for cinematography. It wasn't until the 3rd movie that everyone hates that was nominated for cinematography.
Which is shocking to me because, the first 2 are easily has better cinematography in it than the other 2, other than the 3rd one. Yeah. But not on top of that, just the masterful, how Francis Ford Coppola uses his actors in conjunction with the camera work. Marlon Brando as Don Vito. Oh my God, just completely transformed and became this character. He just did such a good job. And we were talking about it earlier that no one really, I mean, the studio didn't even want him, and he actually and he proved them all wrong and won his Oscar for it. I mean, that's a whole nother
won his
conversation
Oscar.
of what
Didn't
happened
accept
at
his
the
Oscar.
Oscars, but
won his
but,
second Oscar. He already had one, but
yeah. But I mean, it just kind of goes to show. But one of the things I think I love about this movie the most is there's just so many iconic moments in this movie that you can pick out, and like everyone will remember. And for me, like the toll booth with Sonny Corleone, like that is such an iconic spot of this movie. It felt so real. James just brought up the scene at the restaurant with Michael. I mean, the shot of him, the still shot of him with the mirror in the bathroom, just like he's deciding in that moment, am I gonna just walk away from this or am I all in? And it's such an amazing anticipative spot.
Or when they go back to the table and there's a very slow shot, the guy's talking, and it's just the shot is just locked onto Michael the entire time.
Yeah.
And the guy's talking in the background, and you hear the train brakes squealing louder and louder and louder, just building that anticipation of that moment when Michael's going to do something. He just jumps up and shoots him
good
in the face. Like, and it's not even like a rapid shot. It's like shot, and then the other guy's kind of like, what's he going to do? And then he turns and shoots the other guy. It's like this long, painful sort of drawn out. And like, that's the kind of pacing when it's drawn out that I like, when it's intentional and it's building to something. And then it's like, you're feeling the same thing that Michael is. Like you're empathizing with, like, he has to do this and get out of here because, you know, if something happens, he's going to die. You don't want to see him die, but like, you're just as scared as he is during all of this. And for like him to like shoot and then hesitate and then try to shoot the other guy, that like 2 seconds in between there feels like a goddamn eternity.
Does. But the anticipation builds so well. And like the other iconic moments is the horse's head in the bed.
Everyone knows. I mean, everyone parodies.
Yep, everyone parodies, and you know it's one of the most iconic props.
So if you don't know this, Josh, every year I have my annual Godfather party. The intent is to show it to people who have never seen it before. I always say, if you've seen it before, you're welcome. It's just not for you. And I had that this year, but a couple of years ago I had it, and we went to the horse head sequence, which is of course early on in the movie. And one of my friends said, "Now I get that joke in How I Met Your Mother."
See, for me, it was The Simpsons. Lisa, they get Lisa a pony, and the horse's head is in the bed. It's not dead; it's just laying in the bed, and she pulls the sheet back and starts screaming.
Yeah,
and I never got that until I watched The Godfather. It's like, oh, that's what that joke is.
And for me, the spot that really got Marlon Brando his Oscar is one of the beginning scenes of him talking with the I think it's one
Bonacera,
the restaurant owners who's asking for help.
It was the funeral homeowner.
You said you watched.
You come to me here. You know what I'm talking about. I couldn't, I only remember some, but anyway, no, just that opening, that to me is what solidified his Oscar. That whole scene inside his office was just
that's also
so well crafted.
It's also masterful direction and pacing.
Yeah.
In that, like, that little bit at the beginning is so kind of drawn out, and this guy just describing this awful thing happening to his daughter, and it's just this like slow sort of build to just like you see him, and it's just like you don't even know what this movie is yet, and we're just getting this horrible description of something that happened to this girl, and this guy just begging this man to do something about it, and like it's such a great build.
I can't refuse.
It's a great build to a character that we have no idea who he is, but just through that one shot of like this guy almost practically begging on his knees for Don Corleone to do something, you immediately get this established idea of who this man is, how much power he holds, how much respect he garners, and it's just like it's a masterful opening.
Well, the fun fact about that, and again, we'll let Josh get back to his. We're still on Josh's initial thoughts. The fun fact about that is Coppola was writing the script or something, and he didn't initially have it. I mean, obviously, the book that's close to the beginning of the book. The actual opening line of the book, which I have up here somewhere, is Americo Bonacero sat in the courtroom, blah, blah, blah. It opens with him in the courtroom as that happens. But Coppola didn't initially have the script opening with that. And one of his friends, I'm not saying it was one of the movie brats that I wrote a book about, but it's probably someone lesser known, said to him, because Coppola, if you don't know, he was a very new director. He had directed a couple of films, the major motion pictures, but nothing too spectacular. You're a Big Boy Now had been nominated for a couple of Oscars, but he was a new director, but he had won an Oscar for screenwriting. He had won an Oscar for writing Patton. And the thing about Patton is Patton opens up, if you don't know, the movie Patton opens up with this giant American flag that General George Patton walks up.
I think everyone knows that scene.
And everyone knows that scene. Speech. And one of his friends said, Francis, you wrote this, you won an Oscar for writing this intense opening speech that just was a banger right from the start of the movie. You need to do the same thing with this. And so he said, okay. So he wrote the Bonus Era speech to open up the movie. So that was actually a friend of his suggestion. But yeah, go ahead, Josh.
No, it's a good thing to bring up. But I mean, for me, it's a 10 out of 10. I mean, to me, this is easily I think it's probably like my number 3 as my favorites of all time. Number 3 or 4 of my favorites of all time. And to me, it's the best film ever made. I mean, I know Ryan hates that, but to me, there's a big distinction.
I don't hate it.
Because easily, on a filmmaking level, there are moments in the Goonies that I can point out that are not really well made. But I don't give a shit because I just have so much fun watching it.
In 3 years, it'll be the 40th anniversary of the Goonies, and we'll come together.
I can't wait to review that one.
We're all still friends in 3 years.
We will be, I'm sure.
2 more years to Ghostbusters.
Right? But to me, the last one I want to talk about, because we're kind of celebrating it, we're talking about some of these iconic scenes. And to me, nothing really, holds me more than the baptism murders.
Of course, that's the most iconic scene in movie history, like bar none.
For me, it is it's just how to me, what I love about it most is how it's edited, like how it's cut between the talking and going back and forth into the murders. It's just so well crafted that I just, every time I watch it, I could stand up and applaud. It just, to me, that's one of the best editing spots in the whole movie, even more so than the diner scene.
But it's supposed to make you be horrified in a certain way. It's supposed to make you feel.
Yeah. Well, again, it's a mirror of the opening where we spend this time establishing the power of this character, and now we're establishing the power of his son, who is doing this innocent ceremonial gesture with this human being who's just starting out life, who was completely innocent, and all of his goons are out getting their hands dirty, just wiping the floor with all the competition.
Yeah,
by his orders.
Some scenes almost literally.
By his orders.
The fun fact is that as a Catholic, I see a lot of baptisms, because anymore they just have baptisms at Sunday Mass, right? So I see a lot of baptisms every time. That's all I think about. So it's like, will you be? They don't say it in an Italian accent, unfortunately. We're like, will you be baptized? And all I can think of is. I swear, and I've been Godfather. I've stood Godfather to my nephew too. And but when my own children are baptized, that's all I'll be thinking of. Do you renounce Satan?
Yeah. But it's horrifically beautiful. That's how I always like to phrase that scene. It's such a beautiful scene, and everything's shot so like how it's composed is shot so what?
Beautifully beautiful, horribly beautiful,
horrifically beautiful.
It's beautiful filmmaking. So,
but it's hauntingly beautiful. That's better term. But other than that, I mean,
but at the same time, it's like it's a tragedy, and you're supposed to be like, Michael has fallen to the dark side, but at the same time, these are bad guys he's killing too. And like when Barzini finally gets his, and you see him like falling down the steps, you're like, fuck yeah, fuck you, Barzini. Even though,
but that's the eternal conflict. I think that's so beautiful about it, and how Coppola has taken you through on this journey with Michael, how he's kind of fallen dark side, but he's also killing people who have wronged his family. So it's like, would you do that same thing, or would you take, I mean, it's such those moral dilemma conversations that you gotta have, especially in his position.
Is that a conversation we have to have, Josh? Is that really
yes.
Well, on that point, in my preparation for this episode, I was trying to articulate what about it didn't work for me. Okay. So I was looking up like criticisms of the movie to see if something kind of clicked and, got the juices boiling. Nothing really did. But one of the criticisms I do keep seeing is that this really glorifies violence, especially mob violence in a way. And like, we're supposed to be horrified by Michael Corleone doing this terrible thing. But at the same time, like, the movie sets it up so you're kind of cheering for him too. So there's this weird dichotomy of like, you're not supposed to be liking this. This is a terrible thing that he's doing, but at the same time, the movies set it up so you're kind of invested, and it's a weird sort of like moral balancing thing that like I see why people come down on either side. I'm sort of indifferent because again, it's masterfully done, but it's a terrible, horrible thing that's going on. Like they're bad people, but they're still being murdered, and like murder is objectively never a good thing.
It's kind of the same. Like it's to mirror that. It's kind of the same with Sopranos. I'm pretty sure Sopranos got that whole like to make you go have that feeling.
I've never seen
the show. I've never watched the entire show, but I've only watched like the first two seasons.
That's not true. I've seen a couple episodes, but yeah.
I watched the first two seasons in preparation for the prequel that came out earlier.
Yeah,
that came out last year. The Many Saints of Newark. But anyway. Brian, go ahead. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, does that conclude your initial thoughts?
That pretty much wraps up for me. I mean, other than that, I can't really think of much I didn't like about this movie. I mean,
I have one flaw. In spite of what I just said about watching Barzini get his, I've always said we've talked about this in other reviews. We think we're reviewing a movie, and I said, this reminds me of the only negative I've ever had about The Godfather, and that's not a good thing. And the only negative I've had is that towards the end of this movie, they say it wasn't Italia, it was Barzini the whole time. And I'm like, who cares? Like, you go from one sort of faceless, underdeveloped villain to another faceless, underdeveloped villain. I mean, if they built up Barzini to be like this great friend of the family and stuff like that, and then they twist it, and it's like, oh, it was Barzini the whole time. No one cares. Just it's one bad guy, it's another bad guy. Who cares? They kill them both at the end anyway. Whatever. It's the only negative I've ever had about The Godfather. But
that's fair. That's fair. That's a fair criticism.
I don't know why I'm inclined to try and defend that point, but
yeah, to me, yeah, you're right. It's almost like an afterthought more than I think about it. Yeah, because you're kind of just like, okay, and that's fine. Nothing.
Barzini, it's cool.
They're both dead anyway, so that's
they're both
whatever.
dead. So.
I think the point of the Barzini thing though is more about like they thought they understood who the enemy was, and like the dad died, kind of like trying to pass on this message to Michael about. He's going to betray you and he's going to do it this way. And it's going to be this kind of scenario. You'll think you're going into a situation where you're safe and you're not. And like the second that Barzini invites him to something, Michael realizes who the actual enemy is, kind of thing. So it's sort of, it's supposed to be a characteristic turn for Michael based on his father's sort of kind of dying words, because it's the last message Michael really gets from him. So I see like what they were going with there. I kind of see Ryan's point too, that like it doesn't really matter because they're all the enemy in the end and they all end up dying. So it's not like it was like built up as some like big epic twist of like, this is the enemy, I'm going for this guy. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh God, I'm targeting the wrong guy. And you've got to turn your attention to the other guy who's got a gun to the back of your head already. And it's like, it's not that kind of moment. It's like, so I kind of see where Ryan's coming from at the same time. Again, I don't know why I'm inclined to defend this plot point because it doesn't fucking matter to me. Like,
if you could do anything to make me appreciate The Godfather more, James.
I don't know. Like,
but that's why we have all three of us here, is to get bounce off different ideas.
Well, that's often mine and Ryan's dynamic is that he'll come up with a plot hole, and on the spot, I tend to kind of try and rationalize it in some way. I don't always succeed, and like most of the time, I don't even buy the bullshit I'm saying. I just feel inclined to defend the position.
But
I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of like plot hole criticism, of like picking apart like this thing doesn't make sense. The entire film is garbage, kind of thing. So like I feel inclined to kind of like when people are picking apart plot holes to kind of like come up with scenarios to defend them. But like, I have no dog in this fight. I have no horse in this race. I have no horse in my bed.
I do want to bring up, I have read the book. So my experience with this film is that when I was maybe in junior high or high school, my cousin Tony and I rented the movie. He'd seen it before. We watched it. I thought, well, that was all right. I was like 14. I got into high school, and a friend of mine, Joe Price, really loved the book and really loved the movie. And he lent me the book, and I read the book, and I thought, this is a masterpiece. I watched the movie for the second time. I thought, fuck this movie. The book is better. And then a little later on, I watched the movie for the third time. It was my third watching where I said, this is a masterpiece. This is my favorite movie of all time. It took me the third watching. Second time I actually said, fuck this movie. Because the book is, and I'm not even going to say at this point at the age of 34 that the book is better than the movie. Because they're two different creatures. I mean, the movie has the things you can do in a movie that you can't do in a book, obviously, with score and cinematography and everything. But the book has this ability to let you know the characters' inner feelings and inner thoughts and how they think, and you get to understand the way the Corleone family thinks. And one of the things they always talk about in the book is how Michael has that coolness to him, which you get to see in the movie. But it made me think about it more having read the book. Is, you know, the Corleone family, they never threaten; they just do. They'll have a nice, pleasant conversation with you. They won't threaten you. They'll walk away. And the next thing you know, you have a horse's head in your bed. And Michael is not like Sonny. He never gets hot-tempered. He never loses his cool. There's one point in the movie where he's like, he sort of yells a little bit to Mo Green. And I thought that was a little bit out of character. But for the most part, Michael will just, you know, just very, very coolly. And he just has his father's composure. He just has his father's coolness and methodicalness. And he has his father's intelligence. And, you know, you really get to see that. I wanted to mention also, you know, talking about, James mentioned this is part in a changing world. It takes place the book takes place very much from 1945 to 1955. It takes place over the course of 10 years. And
post-war,
Michael comes back from World War II at the beginning of the story. And, you know, it's also very much about the differences between generations, and especially the difference between immigrants and their first generation American children.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a deleted scene. You can Google it. You can look it up on YouTube. There's a scene that was never actually filmed, but it was filmed as a screen test for Diane Keaton and Al Pacino, where they wake up and push together beds at the hotel. And he says, we can't push the beds together at my father's. And she says, why? Because they're in different rooms. And you know, he has this very sort of old-fashioned, he's never had his father's mind. His father also likes to kill people. So, you know, Michael's not only different from his family, which is highlighted in part 2, which James is, you know, will not watch, but
no, I'll watch it. I just didn't have the inclination to watch it today.
Okay. All right. In the penultimate scene of part 2, this is sort of drawn out on, but Michael, we know Michael's always been different from his family, and that he doesn't want to join the mafia, but he's also been different from his family. He's the more American son. You know, he doesn't see the value in again, this is going into part 2, but like, doesn't, you know, he goes to war when the family doesn't see the value in going to war. They don't see the value in dying for your country. Your country is not your blood. And he has values that are American. He wants to be a mathematics professor. One thing that's not really touched upon in the movie is that he's dating a WASP. Dating, you know, they don't really highlight that in the movie, but he's dating a girl named Kay Adams, a blonde girl named Kay Adams. And in the book, there's actually, towards the end, Kay converts to Catholicism. And there's a line in the book where it says, but Michael would have been all right with raising the children Protestant. It was more American. You know, and there's that whole idea that even at the end, Michael is still different from his father, but he comes to kind of be more like, he's the more American son who grows to be more like his father. And so there's just a lot of stuff
and that is
anyone can relate to, you know.
That is the point of part 2 is showing the juxtaposition between father and son, and the growth of both of them, and how they got to the point of being
who they
were,
of
course, and like the differences and similarities between that growth and their characters. And it's funny you mentioned that it's about that sort of time period, and especially that time period being, you know, a great influx of, or like leading up to that time period, a great influx of immigration and, you know, firstborn Americans and secondborn generation Americans and whatnot. My family sort of, I realized this while watching the movie, like there's certain characters within the film that reminded me of certain family members, specifically Vito Corleone reminds me a lot of my grandfather, and Sonny reminds me a lot of my father. And watching them do, like, you talking about them being firstborn, or you know, first generation Americans. My father's generation was first generation Canadian. My grandfather immigrated from Ireland at a young age, just like Vito Corleone. I've always the scene in the second film of him at Staten Island is always how I've kind of pictured my grandfather coming over, because he came over at a very similar age at a very similar time. I think there's like 20 years difference, but I mean, 20 years at that time is negligible. It's still
old.
it's still, but it's still sort of a similar sort of like culture, especially with like there was still this sort of like lack of acceptance of certain groups of immigrants, especially Italian Americans, especially Irish Americans. There was a lot of dislike of those people. So like, again, I see the parallels there. And that's part of what this film is both sort of beloved for and reviled for, is its depiction of Italian Americans, because up until this point, Italian Americans in a lot of cinema were stereotypes. If you remember the meme from like 10 years ago, somebody touched my spaghetti, which was from an old cartoon where like they're just doing this stilted, like horribly racist Italian accent. And like this was one of the first times like they felt like genuine human beings. And even though they're not great human beings, they at least feel like fully formed people as opposed to stereotypes. But then they also start to build like different stereotypes about, you know, the Italian mafia and like the way the families kind of work. And even if you're not attached to the mafia, there's criticism of like the violence involved and the, you know, certain things about, oh, they only eat spaghetti and meatballs, and well, no, we clearly see them eating Chinese food and other stuff, but it's like people kind of latch on to like this was very negative too. So there's a fascinating dichotomy about the time period, about the culture, about the generation thing, and like I see a lot of parallels that I really relate to. So
yeah, and
you should love this movie.
I wish I could. I really would. Like, I give it full credit for being a fantastic movie. I'm just bored to tears, and like I don't relate to anybody, and it's hard for me to get into it. Like, Breaking Bad was a fantastic film, fantastic TV series. The first 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, great TV series. I don't give a shit because I don't relate to any of the characters. I don't have empathy for any of the characters.
That is a legitimate criticism you have. Like if you don't relate to the characters, like me, I love it. I love the characters. If you don't relate to the characters, that's a legitimate criticism. I don't think you can say I give it 10 out of 10.
It's not a criticism of the film itself. It's a criticism of my connection to the film. And there are certain people who can enjoy the film regardless of whether they connect with the characters. And there are people who do genuinely connect with this. I have friends who genuinely connect with this. This isn't a failing on my part. This isn't a failing on their part. It's simply just a reality of I don't relate to these characters, so I have a hard time engaging with this film the same way Ryan does.
Hey, that's pretty well said. That's pretty well said.
So, like, I don't know. Like, again, lots of films that I enjoy a great deal. Lots of films that I would put higher on the list than this. Objectively, again, I would put Citizen Kane in a higher position than this film, just because I think in strictly filmic terms, I think it did more with the medium, and I think it did a lot of things that today still aren't appreciated for what they were.
Well, sadly, we missed the 80th anniversary of that. We should be doing this. Is the first thing we've done. This is the first anniversary retrospective tribute we've done. We could have done it for Terminator 2. We could have done it for Hook, which is another favorite of all of
this is part of more of them this year.
This is part of the reason Ryan brought up the other day, happy 50th anniversary, and I suggested we do this episode because since I've joined this podcast, this show, this channel, I have not seen Ryan give a positive review to any movie, not a single movie. And I figured I'll throw him a fucking gimme, and this one will be one he likes. And it's like,
I remember
this is a good time to do it because it's the 50th anniversary. I may not have the most glowing review for it, but I recognize it as being a great movie that has its significance, and we being movie fans should celebrate it. It would be it would be remiss for us not to celebrate it. And there's lots of other films I would love to celebrate once we get to that point. Lots of other films that I would love to do retrospectives, even without an anniversary. Like I would love to do a Hitchcock retrospective and a Akira Kurosawa retrospective, a John Ford. You know, I'd love to go back and watch Blade Runner and, you know, review that with people, and Jaws and Back to the Future. I really want to do Back to the Future.
Well, that next year we're sort of in a land where there's the last year, this year, and next year are all sort of the 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings, and I'm rereading Lord of the Rings, and I thought we could do something on Lord of the Rings, especially considering that James and I have actually read the books, and Josh and I have a mutual. Josh and I have a mutual friend who is I thought we could have William guest star
if I can get him. He's a busy guy, but my friend William, he is probably the go-to man when it comes to Lord of the Rings knowledge. I mean, that dude knows.
I thought it'd be cool to like have Josh be the outside man who hasn't read the books, and have us like kind of compare the books and talk about why didn't they forge the sword before they left Rivendell, And
That did bug me the first time I watched the movie, but now I don't care. No, like honestly,
Yeah.
it's a tangent, but
up,
yeah.
To wrap up everything, we'll put this one to bed. This is a movie that definitely should be celebrated. And if you haven't seen it and you're watching this, I guess we just spoiled the shit out of it for you. But I think it's a movie you definitely would want to revisit if you haven't seen it in a while. I mean, to me, it's a perfect movie to sit down. For me, like when I saw it, I made myself a nice steak. I made some asparagus, had a glass of wine, and I watched The Godfather. And to me, that's the kind of, it's not a pop shove in your mouth popcorn kind of film. It's a movie you want to sit, absorb, and ingest everything that's happening with the characters, with the story, and with how it's shot. It's much slower paced. I mean, it's definitely a slower paced film, but to me, it pays off in the end. Once you get to Michael when he becomes finally the Don. And I don't know, to me it's just, I can't believe it's been 50 years. It's insane. It's 50 years ago. Holy shit. I mean, it's crazy. And so I'm looking forward to and we won't do this movie turns 23, we're going to view. No, movies like it's been 25 years or 30 or 30, something 40, above 50. That, 35, I mean, 40.
I would like to do some other films that don't have anniversaries connected to them just because the anniversaries are going to be 5 years off, and it's are we still going to be doing this in 5 years? I really want to do Back to the Future, guys. I really want to do it. Okay.
When is the Back to the Future anniversary?
I don't know, but
05.
05
or 25.
So
yeah,
25. Okay, that's 25. But I mean, Ryan, to sum it up for you, how it makes you feel. For me, it's like I said, to me, it's the journey and how it makes me, and where you go watching it. What about you, Ryan? How does it make you feel like it's the best movie? Because on a filmmaking level, it's for me, and then how it makes you feel as well. I
think I've been very clear. I think it's the just the beauty of the film. I mean, the beauty and the tragedy at the same time. You feel like it's this orchestra. I always can think of Goodfellas, and Goodfellas is another great movie. Great fucking movie. Probably also top 30 or 40. But so
again, another film with great sort of build up to how to cook properly. The slicing of the
onions,
the garlic. No, the garlic with the razor.
Yeah. But it's such a different, when you think about how different this is from Goodfellas. Goodfellas is very brash, has a lot of F-bombs. It's very, whereas this has this royal,
intellectual,
regal score by Nino Rota. No, 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 no. You don't see that shit in Goodfellas. It's very different because this is about the royal family, right? This is about the higher ups. This is about, it's not just about the mob. It's about this royal family, and it has such an epic feel to it. And yes, it's tragic, but it's beautiful along the way, and it just makes you feel like you almost exhausted at the end. It just feels like, holy crap, that was a journey I just went through, and I'm glad to have gone through it. And it's people loved watching tragedies for hundreds, thousands of years. Obviously, people watched Romeo and Juliet long before this and got something out of it, and Hamlet. So why should this be any different? Part 2 is more tragic, but we'll go over that in 2 years if we're all still here in 2 years. And James has forced himself to watch it. But
bought the Blu-rays. I'm going to watch them eventually. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but I want to do. We should just do. As long as we're saying fuck it, let's just do. We might as well do part 2 soon. But at any rate, The Godfather. It's my favorite film. God bless it. Thank you.
James, any last thoughts before we get out of here?
Again, I give this film full credit. I mean, I've spent most of this review, despite my opening saying I don't like the movie, that I've spent most of it praising it or going gaga over certain scenes. It's a fantastic film. It's, again, a 10 out of 10. It's just, again, it's a personal thing where there's objectively good films and then there's subjectively good films. To me, this is an objectively good film, and it just doesn't work for me subjectively, despite my geeking out about certain scenes, because I am a film nerd, and film nerdy shit gets me excited. So this one has lots of that, but again, the pacing is a little dull for me. My inability to kind of relate to characters makes it difficult for me to have a lot of compassion for what's happening. So full credit to the film, just doesn't work for me, and that's okay. Not every film is for everybody. So
yep. Not everything is a perfect film. As far as even on Rotten Tomatoes, there's very few that's sitting 100%. Everyone loves it. There's
except for
very
Paddington
few in
2.
that regard. Huh?
Except for Paddington 2.
And Toy Story 2.
I thought Paddington 2 was the only one that had a perfect score. on Rotten
Toy
Tomatoes.
Story and Toy Story 2.
Oh, there's a few. There's a few that have one.
Okay.
But a couple thoughts before we leave. One, if you're wondering why Josh and I haven't lit up this whole review, it's because neither of our landlords allow smoking. So
I wish I could have been. I smoke cigars, so you know.
I don't. Apparently, we're both rule followers. Like I'm a notorious rule follower. I'll do what you ask me to do. Josh, I don't know why he gives a hell. But the other thing is, let's just before we go out, we have to mention this. Without Godfather, there would be no Star Wars. The success of The Godfather is what led to American Graffiti being made, which was produced by Francis Ford Coppola, right? Coppola and Lucas were, I've read biographies on both of them. And if you're reading both biographies, there's times where you would be confused, you get mixed up as to which book you're reading because their chapters are covering the same thing. It's like reading a biography of John Lennon and Paul McCartney.
Lucas was on this film. He was a second unit director.
He directed a lot of the shots in the montage sequence, where they're at war and they're doing the montage. So yeah, like I said, it's like reading biographies of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. You're going to get mixed up which one you're reading until they kind of diverge paths. But
John's is the one with Yoko Ono.
Yeah, but actually, Coppola notoriously didn't want to make this film, didn't really want to make any of the films, and we can get into that later on a different film. Maybe when we do part 2, we'll talk about that. But he had refused it once or twice, and they were editing THX at American Zoetrope at Coppola's studio, and Lucas was editing it. The phone rang. Coppola picked it up. It was Peter Bart from Universal or from Paramount again, saying, "Seriously, you should direct this movie. I know you got kids to feed." And Coppola covered up the receiver with his hand, turned to the side, turned to George, who was editing THX, and said, "George, should I make this gangster movie?" And George said, "Yeah, Francis, we're in debt. We got to do something." And so that's the reason it got made. And then when THX bombed and George wanted to make American Graffiti, part of the reason that got made is they said, "Well, can you get your buddy Francis to produce it?" So Francis Ford Coppola produced American Graffiti. It led to the success of that, led to Star Wars. And
the rest is history.
The rest is history.
We should review THX and American Graffiti.
I've never seen it. I have never seen it.
I have both of them in multiple copies.
I've never seen it, but I've heard it's pretty awful.
Hey, I want to review it.
We'll do an anniversary for that one.
I think the anniversary passed.
That was last year. That was 1971.
Oh, shit. Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. We want to give a congratulations to The Godfather for turning 50 years old. It's such a masterful film. Sad that it only won 3 Oscars. It deserved way more than it did. But
Best Picture, it's a low amount of awards for a Best Picture winner. I think it's the lowest in like almost since the 40s, but it did win Best Picture. So
Best Picture, Best Actor, and Best Screenwriting.
Yep.
So
all of which
more importantly, everybody that you have seen it, what did you think of The Godfather? Do you think it's one of the greatest films of all time, or were you with James where you objectively see how good it is, but just doesn't work for you? Leave your comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and your score out of 10. We'd love to have the conversation with you on this masterful film in cinema. Also, if you like what you watched, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you receive all of our great content we have here at ReelTime. That's all we have for today. Again, I'm Josh Williams.
I'm Ryan Murphy.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
And thank you for keeping it real.
With ReelTime.
Good night.